National Geographic article about white replacement or the declining white demographic in certain parts of America, and the way that towns and the culture of towns has changed as a result, leaving the old stock white demographic feeling alienated and left out and sort of, I guess, an afterthought in their own communities. And the way that the article is written is that this is just an inevitability, this is what's happening, this is what's going to continue to happen, get used to it, it's not a bad thing. But for me, I think that it's not a good thing, and that doesn't come from a place of hatred or rejection of other people. I grew up in Canada, so people who are immigrants have always been a part of my community, and when I went to university in Ottawa, it was a very multicultural city. Now that being said, that the immigrants were there, and I had many friends and very close relationships with people from a variety of different racial backgrounds. It was never a problem. We were all Canadians. That's how it felt at the end of the day. We were all Canadians. But what it meant to be a Canadian still was based around that old stock European demographic of people who established the country, built it from the ground up. The issue is that in a lot of these countries, there's been an extensive amount of propaganda to deconstruct and dismantle the identity of, for example, British people or Canadian people. We've had our prime ministers and our leaders say to us, there is no such thing necessarily as a ethnic British person or an ethnically Canadian person. Anybody can be British or anybody can be Canadian. And in the dismantling of that identity, it becomes a lot more tricky to talk about demographic replacement of the people who originally held that identity, I think. And places like Canada now describe themselves as a cultural mosaic, in that there's even this kind of pride in the fact that people can come to your country, they don't have to assimilate, they don't have to speak the same language as you, there doesn't need to be any homogeneity with regard to religious belief or cultural practices, that we're all just going to coexist in these little pocket communities in a close proximity to one another. And if there is no assimilation and you have a group of outside people who are coming into your country, retaining all of their cultural, religious, and ethnic idiosyncrasies, and then that group becomes the majority, the country will be effectively changed. That's obvious. So people who simply want to preserve the countries and the communities that they grew up in, the communities that their grandparents grew up in, so that it will still be intact when they are grandparents themselves. That's where this worry comes from, I think. It's not about a hatred of immigrants or wanting zero immigrants in your country whatsoever. I think it's just it's a numbers thing, really. And it's an acknowledgement of identity. And now it's very obvious to see as well that the people who are this is a good thing, and anyone who's worried about this or thinks that this might be a problem is a racist. These are people who have had their identity fragmented from their racial group, their ethnic group, their sense of nationalism or patriotism. I personally prefer to focus on birth rates and promoting family values and encouraging European people to have children. I don't think necessarily that there are many other viable options for dealing with this situation. And if the problem is that white people aren't having enough babies to replace themselves, whether or not they become minorities in their own country, which it seems to be somewhat inevitable at this point. White people and European people may just have to get used to being a minority, and our societies and our cultures will change, and we will just have to adapt to that. I think that telling people to focus on family life and have children is, it's not just good for solving the problem of declining birth rates and demographic replacement and this kind of stuff, but I think, meaning in life comes from family. Family is the most important thing in life, and without it, we're just I think people who never have children are kind of infantilized in a way, and they never learn to see themselves as anything other than just, you know, an individual and, you know, someone who's trying to meet their own desires in whatever way possible. When you have children and when you have a family, you have to accept sacrifice. You have to accept an immense amount of responsibility. And I think it makes an adult out of you. I think it makes a whole person out of you.